And that is, it's much less evident when people leave and go to
I get that.
another country, you know.
What about the other thing which I discovered shortly after Brexit on this programme, which was people who were ringing me in, I think I could describe as a state of surprise that their own priorities were beginning to shift and that they were beginning to jettison, a generational commitment to the union in favour of what you would have to call, common sense.
Well, I'll put it to you this way, is I've expressed it to other people, that in some senses it was like a 1916 moment.
Right.
Now, obviously not with the same consequences.
No, of course.
You know what I mean? Not with the executions in the Easter Rising. However, what happened, like, to do a bit of amateur history, like what happened in 1916 in Easter, like 1 week, the majority of the country was in favour of home rule, but not in favour of the Republican insurrection. And within a couple of weeks, the whole nature of the argument had changed.
There it is.
Now, people say that's because people were executed, and indeed that is true to an extent. But also, it was a realisation amongst the population in Ireland that it had been promised in 1914 that there would be home rule, and that forever in a day, England then would never make the rules in Ireland. And what had happened was, when you executed these people in 1916, it said, oh, the English have reverted to type. This is what they always do when there's a rebellion. So that and I know it may be a bit of a stretch, but when the Brexit thing came up, a lot of people said, hang on a minute, we've had the Good Friday Agreement, we all went and voted for it, 70% of people voted for the Good Friday Agreement, and now when the going gets tough, Britain says, well, it doesn't really matter what you think. It doesn't really matter, and regardless of the fact that
you've taken me out to the news, Dennis. I got to fill in the gaps because, of course, worth remembering that the Brexit vote in Northern Ireland was to remain. So that idea that an English arrogance, if you like, an English contempt for the views of the Irish people had come to the fore once again, and that, of course, would call people to question where their loyalties should lie. And a lot of people answered that question in ways that I said at the outset of my question to you, in ways that surprised them. It is 10:30. There is, for me, an air of inevitability. Dennis doesn't quite agree, doesn't think it's inevitable, but you want to challenge that narrative. There's at least one phone line waiting for you on 0345 606097 10:30. And time for the headlines.
In a speech in London, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has accused the Russian president of trying to intimidate the world with his military parade in Moscow, marking the Second World War victory over the Nazis. Speaking to a crowd of thousands in the Russian capital, Vladimir Putin justified his aggression against Ukraine, claiming it was necessary because of a Western invasion plan. New research suggests around 1 in 7 adults in the UK live in homes where people have skipped meals or gone hungry because they can't afford food. The Food Foundation charity says that's up 57% in 3 months. A junior footballer has died after suffering a cardiac arrest on the pitch during an under-13s game. Samuel Akwazi, who was 13, that's on Saturday while playing for FC Cavaliers in Nottingham. The weather: Scotland and Northern Ireland, cloudy and windy with rain at times, which will reach northwestern part. Otherwise, England and Wales mostly fine with sometimes hazy sunshine. A warm afternoon, especially in the southeast, a high of 22 Celsius.
LBC.
The podcast show 2022 is coming to Islington, London, May 25th and 26th, where the international world of podcasting awaits you. Featuring world-class speakers, Johnny Vaughan, Emily Maitland, Elizabeth Day, and hundreds more, as well as the biggest brands and unmissable live shows. Day passes on sale now. Use promo code GLOBAL and get 20% off. Book yours now at thepodcastshowlondon.com.
Experience. It comes in handy when planning to go on an all-inclusive cruise. It's knowing that all-inclusive can mean too inclusive. Having to get your wallet out every 10 minutes. Included. Endless queues. Included. Being crammed into a dining room. Included. Well, here's an alternative all-inclusive experience on a Saga boutique cruise. Specialty dining included. Gratuities included. Your own balcony included. Dining en masse definitely not included.
2023 season now on sale. Search Saga Boutique Cruises. Saga. Experiences everything. Over 50s only.
At Lidl, we're big on a summer of so it's time to get those Barbies out with 2 Vermondo vegan burgers just $1.59, 2 Seabass fillets with butter for $3.69, and 6 British Big Dog hot dog sausages just $2.99. Now that's big on quality and always Lidl on price. Subject to availability, selected stores, excludes NI.
We don't do slapdash. We don't do bodge jobs, and we never do that'll do. We do a job properly. We're Trust a Trader, and we're proud of all our members and the great work they do in homes like yours. So when you need something doing, from locksmiths to landscaping, just type it into trustatrader.com and you'll get reputable, reviewed tradespeople in your area, because you can always trust a trader.
TrustATrader.com.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
It is 33 minutes after 10, and it is a day that many of us who grew up in the 70s and the 80s in the United Kingdom with an apostrophe on our names, with an Irish surname, I don't think we ever thought it would dawn perhaps in our lifetimes, but the notion of a united Ireland is certainly a much more clear and present possibility than it has been at any previous point since the 1916 partition that Dennis just referred us to. And speaking of Dennis, that was a brilliant call, wasn't it? It made me realise there's actually a third option. I said I can only see this unfolding in one of two ways. Either there's a form of blackmail effected upon the Irish government and the European Union by the British government that would say, all right, well, we're opening up all the borders, and if you want to keep stuff out of the single market, out of the customs union, you're going to have to put up checkpoints where the border used to be. And you know, that would be blackmail, because I can't imagine it would happen, but it would. Yeah, okay, it's a shakedown, a con job, and you'd look me in the eye and tell me you'd put that past this lot. And the second option I suggested would be a united Ireland, something that has edged ever closer with the results in the elections last week. But there is, of course, a third way it can all be avoided, and that is for the United Kingdom to rejoin the single market and the customs union. I'd completely forgotten about that, but so those are your three. Speaking of brilliant contributors, Brenda in Belfast building up something of a following of her own on social media after her recent contributions to the programme. Delighted to welcome you back, Brenda. What would you like to say?
I think it's best if everybody starts to take things very gently, James.
Yes, of course.
There's always an underlying fear here of people being murdered in the streets again.
Yeah.
We've just passed the anniversary of Lyra McKee, who was a journalist that was shot in the head here in Derry during some rioting between the police and dissident Republicans. Myself and my friend organised a 3-day peace march between Belfast and Derry when that happened. And I'm still in contact with her family, and they reflect the feelings of the majority of people here, that we do not want to see one hair of one head harmed on anybody in the name of so-called fights for democracy.
Right, of course.
And it's imperative, as a mother and as an active member of the community, right across the board, I speak with people from all over this place. We are all of the one mindset that no matter what happens, we will look after each other.
Well, more power to you, but you know and I know that the wheels of history are turning, Brenda, and who knows what might get crushed beneath them.
Well, I'm determined, Jane, that not one person is going to go to the grave. There's been too many lost lives here, and I'm highly emotional, which you can probably tell.
Yes, of course.
But I fear...
Talk me through why you're highly... What is it about recent events that has heightened your emotion so acutely?
Well, if you speak to my age group, so I'm in my 50s, we lived through a very traumatic time where innocent people were murdered on a daily, weekly basis, and we saw too much. We are a member of a traumatized society, multi-generational traumatized society, and we're not talking pre-1969. We're not just talking, we're talking about all the generations that went before. We all remember the stories from our parents when they couldn't find work, or people were beaten on the street. And when internment happened, I think one of the biggest problems we have here, G, and I lived in England for 2 years, the English don't know what happened here. I'm a location manager for film and TV here, and I would work with crews from all over the world. And on the last job I did here last year, the English crew asked me to explain why people here did not have the right to vote until after 1969. They were horrified. See, people talk about they getting out the right to vote because of what the suffragettes achieved for us. The Civil Rights March here, everybody knows the Civil Rights because of Bloody Sunday. One of the things that the Civil Rights Marchers demanded here was one person, one vote. People did not have the right to vote. You had to be a ratepayer or a business owner, had maybe 5 votes. This state was created for a unionist domination, and people's rights did not exist right up until the Civil Rights movement started, inspired by Martin Luther King, a peaceful demonstration to achieve civil rights for all, because it wasn't just the Catholics that were denied the right to vote, it was Protestant working class too. So the Civil Rights Parade inspired that. Then Bloody Sunday happened. And as they said on the day of Bloody Sunday, when those people were murdered, that was the biggest recruitment shot in the arm for the IRA, because that's what spurred young men and young women to join the IRA when they saw how innocent people were being murdered in the streets by the British Army.
You know what I'm going to say next? I mean, this is profoundly helpful for a lot of people, myself included. But we are where we are, as the politicians like to say. And what you know and I know is that there is a provision within the Good Friday Agreement for a referendum to be held upon Irish unification when, and the language is vague, I think it talks about when there is a broad feeling or something like that, that there may be a desire for it. We're closer to that than we've ever been before since 1921, aren't we?
Yeah, but we have to take it back to a human level, James.
No, I know we do, and you have, but I now have to bring it back to a political level and ask you what you think is going to happen.
What I think needs to happen...
No, what you think is going to happen.
The intransigence of the DUP, who are a right-wing supremacy organisation that have repeatedly denied people the rights across the board, has to be faced down. But we cannot trust the British government. The British government don't even care about their own citizens in England. We have rising poverty, children going hungry.
Steer you back again. I very kindly and politely, I know all that, and you often tell me things that I don't already know. So what would facing down the DUP look like?
Facing down the DUP is to get the people out on the streets and demand that Stormont gets back up and running again.
And that would stave off unification. Then we would just be back to devolution. We'd be back to a Northern Irish government consisting of Northern Irish people in Northern Ireland, rather than the relative mess of the last few years.
People have always said, James, we need to unite the people before we can unite the country. But there are a lot of very frightened people here, and we need to reach across and hold each other and stand shoulder to shoulder.
I applaud that. I really do. You know I do. But I am today more interested in what is likely to happen rather than what we would all like to happen. And I'm not in any way diluting the importance of what you're saying to me, but the DUP are not really an organisation that are in the business of being faced down, are they? And they have much closer links with a Conservative and Unionist government than any body on the nationalist side of the divide does. And you then have to factor in the reality of Brexit, over my dead body, Boris Johnson said about the border in the Irish Sea. Spoiler alert, there is now a border in the Irish Sea, so this lot will stop at nothing in terms of short-term political gain. Your points about the relative context in which they hold people living here, never mind in Northern Ireland, with regards to that, they're all pertinent, they're all live. I can't see what happens next, except a slow, perhaps, move towards that referendum. Can you?
Well, what we're going to have to do is have a little bit of patience, because of the bottom line.
That's how you started, but I want a yes or a no. I'm going to push you on that. I can't see the direction of traffic. If everything's...
I work between the north and the south as a HGV driver, and what you'll hear a lot down south is they have enough troubles of their own. They don't need to take on our social welfare bill. They don't need to take on our unemployed.
Yeah.
They don't need to take on whatever debt that we may bring down with us as
Some of the
well.
poorest regions in the whole of Europe are in Northern Ireland, of course. I think 9 out of 10 are in the United Kingdom.
Where I live as one of them. The Derry and Strabane City Council area would be quite high up on that list. So I don't
largely because of the historic discrimination and sort of poor treatment that Brenda described. Actually, these are things that can be overcome and arguably overcome more quickly in a united Ireland than in a still divided one. But these are questions for the ages. What do you think is going to happen next?
I think we're probably going to go into at least a couple of months of now negotiations between the DUP and Sinn Féin, because Sir Jeffrey Donaldson is, I think, quite adamant that unless the protocol is sorted out, he seems to be under the massive impression that this protocol is really, really disadvantaging Northern Ireland, whereas I think the main issue is that it puts us on different regulatory alignment with the rest of the UK, which I think is their main problem with it.
Seems to me to have been quite good for Northern Ireland. The argument that they've got the best of both worlds is politically problematical for unionists because their bond with the United Kingdom has a lot more to do with emotion and arguably even religion than it does with trade and economics. And of course the government in Westminster is terrified of it because if it turns out that not being in or remaining in the customs union and single market is advantageous, then of course the nonsense of Brexit deflates still further, and it's already one of the emptiest balloons in the history of balloons. Andy, thank you. Time now, 10:46.
This is LBC.
With Pension Bee, you can combine, contribute and withdraw online. For Andrew, we made withdrawing from his pension easy.
I love to travel. Pension Bee gives me that ability. Withdrawing money from your Pension Bee account is really simple. You go inside the app, you select withdrawal. It's a very simple process.
We're building a pension company you can believe in. Be pension confident. Join at pensionbee.com. Capital at risk, authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Drawdown available from age 55-57 from 2028.
My name's Chris Hadfield. I'm an astronaut. I've been lucky enough to go around the world 2,600 odd times. Seeing the entire world, it gives you a perspective of the shared nature of humanity itself. We need to recognize that nothing stays the same. Change isn't just inevitable, it's necessary. And technology enables us to do things that we just can't naturally do. To be able to measure the changes to the surface of the planet from orbit, to be able to effortlessly communicate around the world, that opens up so many possibilities. And when you can fold the impossible into the reality of normal life right now, I think that's what progress is.
When technology enables progress, ESET is here to protect it. ESET Digital Security. Progress protected.
When it feels like money's tight, it's good to know that at Tesco, we price match hundreds of products to Aldi every week. From strawberries to crumpets. So you can be sure you'll find the products that matter most to you. Because right now, every little helps. Prices matched pro rata and checked on hundreds of comparable products from GPLD stores and or online twice weekly. Price most often found matched excluding promotions. Products matched varied by week and availability varies by store excluding Express and Northern Ireland. Details tesco.com/Aldi price match.
Many people struggle with loose and missing teeth. Often their dentist has told them nothing can be done. Let the TDC team restore your teeth, your smile and your confidence with our award-winning Smile in a Day dental implant treatment. Book your consultation today. Visit smileinaday.co.uk.
Get up and at it, as my mother used to say. Get moving. Get your skates on. Get your hair done in the race run. Get behind the wheel. Get picking up and dropping off. Get busy. Get deliveries done. And get home to see Mom. Whatever the mission, Enterprise Rent-A-Car helps over 100,000 every day.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, with James O'Brien.
10:49 is the time. A lot of callers coming in from Northern Ireland specifically, which is such a lovely sort of thing for me to see on my switchboard. When I started working here, it was a struggle to get the phones to ring at all. Now, a conversation about Northern Ireland, if we so wished, could be conducted entirely with contributions from Northern Ireland. It's good to know people are listening over there. Same true in Scotland, actually, which no doubt we'll be talking a little bit more about as well in the coming months. But the bit I can't pin down yet, and I don't have the polling is not, infallible anyway. The government talks about the protocol, and it talks about it in the most surreal and Brexity of ways. This is what got them elected. This is the oven-ready deal. This is the over my dead body operation, and the protocol was introduced and it worked, and the government are furious. So Dominic Raab yesterday, I'll get his words right actually, because I find even a seasoned watcher of Dominic Raab like me finds some of the stuff that comes out of his mouth absolutely incredible. Here it is. If the Northern Ireland Protocol had been implemented in a less dogmatic, rigid, and I have to say political way, what does Raab think the negotiations were about? I mean, what Dominic Raab is essentially saying yesterday on the telly is that if the Northern Ireland Protocol had been less implemented, and you can dress it up all he likes, if it had been implemented in a less dogmatic, rigid, and I have to say political way, you can't implement stuff that hasn't been negotiated. This is so frustrating, but I shall explain it. You can't implement stuff that hasn't been negotiated. They told you and me that what they had negotiated was absolutely brilliant. It was an oven-ready deal that would get Brexit done and avoid a border in the Irish Sea, because Boris Johnson had said, actually that came a little bit earlier, that would only happen over his dead body. You cannot implement something that hasn't been negotiated. The reason why the European Union turned up with flipping boxes of paperwork at the first meeting and David Davis turned up with a cheese and pickle sandwich in a Tupperware pot is because they understood what was at stake, and we were still living in cloud cuckoo. The fact that we're still living in cloud cuckoo land is actually even perhaps beyond belief for James O. Brexit. I find it staggering. So what Raab said yes, but I mean, if they'd implemented it a bit less, we could have got it. If it wasn't for that pesky protocol actually being implemented, we could have got away with it. If they hadn't actually implemented the thing that David Frost got a peerage for negotiating, then none of this would have happened. Sheesh. But what I don't know, you don't know what you don't know. What I don't know is what the average punter feels about it. I mean, because these checks on goods coming into Northern Ireland are politically and culturally toxic for the unionists, and the more excitable the unionist is, the more toxic these checks are, because it means that stuff coming into Belfast is subject to a different regulatory framework than stuff coming into Birmingham. And they hate that because it makes them feel less British, less union-ish. But for normal people, like shopping, buying a car or buying a bag of cauliflower, I honestly don't know how big a deal is the protocol for if you could unalign yourself completely from sectarian loyalty and simply answer whether or not the protocol is having a positive or negative or utterly negligible impact upon your life as a Northern Irish resident. That is missing from this debate. Or maybe it's just me not paying enough attention, but I'm not getting that. And that's why it's 10:53. I'm going to give you another call to arms and see if anyone can answer that for me. The protocol is a political hot potatoes, but for ordinary geezers and geezeresses on the streets of Northern Ireland, what does it mean? Well, because Dominic Raab isn't going to tell you. He doesn't even know what day it is. You wouldn't trust him to boil an egg. Oh, this would have all gone brilliantly if only they hadn't actually implemented it. Sums it up, doesn't it? So, obviously, the next callers I've got up, both in Belfast, were not... They'd rung in before I asked that question, so I may ambush them with it. But I do want to know, what does the protocol mean on the ground to people in Northern Ireland? But that's not the question I asked. The question I asked was about the inevitability of unification. And Heather is in Belfast. Heather, what would you like to say?
Hello there. Hello. Thank you very much for having me on.
You're very welcome.
I'm very excited. I've been listening to your show for so long.
It's bound to be an anticlimax. I can only apologise in advance.
Oh no, wish it's okay. But I actually did phone up about the protocol. So yes. There you go. So I was born in 1990. So I'm a Good Friday baby. So I was like tail end. tail end of the Troubles. You know, I've seen it all, and I grew up in a very Protestant village. You know, I grew up in the 12th, born to be proud to be a Protestant, very proud of being British.
Yes.
But I actually have an Irish passport now. I voted Irish in the census that's coming out next week, so that will be very interesting to see the makeup of Northern Ireland now.
Yes, it will.
I think that is going to be more pragmatic than the Assembly elections.
Well, because in terms of the language of the Good Friday Agreement, that would convey a stronger message than the arithmetic of the election. You're absolutely right, and everyone had to fill that in as well, so the turnout will be 100%.
Yeah, so I would say that is probably more indicative because although I still am a unionist, I voted Alliance. I didn't vote for UUP or DUP. I voted for Other because a lot of people, especially people like me, were more pragmatic. We want the protocol to work because we could be the sweetheart country of Europe, and it does not affect us day to day. The protocol does not. I have people who were canvassing my doors, and I asked them, I asked Alliance, we returned to Alliance members in my constituency, and they said only 2 people complained about the protocol. Really? The protocol is day to day, it doesn't affect us, but at the moment, Jeffrey Donaldson, because they have their own internal fighting and their own, what's that word, kind of existential crises, they're blaming the protocol. Because they don't want to be Deputy First Minister. So they're blaming the protocol.
As you speak, a message off one of my contacts in the Irish media who says exactly what you just said. The DUP's stance on the protocol is a smokescreen, which means they can keep the executive suspended without admitting it's because of Sinn Féin being the largest party.
That's exactly it. So it works for them. And so, and I just don't know how they get away with it. I'm not the biggest fan of the DUP, but they always manage to fly through and to blame something else as opposed to themselves, because they have turned off people like me who would very happily be part of the union. That's why I voted Other, because what the unionism that is offered to me does not do anything, nor does it do for most of my peers.
So no, you're prioritising pragmatism over history and...
Yeah. It's because I listen to Brenda, and I have so much, see when I hear her phone in, she is everything that I aspire to be, and that's coming across the divide of the community. Yeah. And my generation is the last generation of the Troubles, so we're a bit more hopeful. That's what the Good Friday Agreement gave us, is hope, and to not worry, and we don't want to breed contempt or past, we want to move on. But unfortunately... And I guess that,
the DUP, this is why you talk of existential crisis, because the unionist movement depends upon division. Without division, there's no unionist movement, really. And Sinn Féin in this election have sort of managed to, whether it's accurate or fair or not, they've managed to unhitch themselves from that tradition in a way that the DUP simply can't, possibly because of the direction of traffic. So if there was a referendum, can I ask how you'd vote in it?
This is the thing. I don't know how I would vote. I would have to do serious internal thoughts. My family already call me a turncoat because I have an Irish passport.
Right,
it's fine. It's all jokes. It's all jokes.
But it's still there, isn't it? It's still bubbling under on some level, the emotion.
I don't want a referendum anytime soon because I think I'm still too angry about DUP and Brexit that I would probably vote on emotions, and we've all seen what happens when people vote on emotions.
You could say, yes, well, that's just, you've never a wiser word said. Thank you. I mean, even the word sends a shiver down my spine, so I take your point completely. Shall I squeeze in James before the news? Or James is also in Belfast. James, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James with Brexit.
That's what they call me.
Yeah, well, I feel very strongly about the protocol as well. I mean, I was more concerned about that going in. Right. I'm a unionist from a unionist background. I've always identified as Irish first and foremost. Okay. But definitely from a very unionist background, and believe me, from anybody I'm talking to, unionist or nationalist, the protocol is not on the radar at all.
Mad, isn't it? You'd think, looking at the British newspapers, you'd think it was the only thing that mattered in the election last week. Speaking to Northern Irish voters, it barely mattered at all.
No, and because it puts Northern Ireland in a unique position within the UK. So I just feel that's what I said to your producer. For the first time since Brexit, for the first time in my life, even though I'm a unionist, I've always been very liberal and very Irish too. first time in my life since Brexit, I would definitely consider voting for United Ireland.
Wow. Because it would mean staying in the single market and customs union.
Absolutely, and I would mean being part of a thriving, vibrant Europe and not Little Britain.
Well, yeah.
The Tory government, this current government in particular, the disdain, the disgust me, and it's just the way they've treated all parts of the UK. I mean, really, Scotland and Northern Ireland in particular, who voted to stay in the European Union, the way we've been treated is just appalling, and it's just complete disdain, you know.
Well, and it seems to be continuing. I'm so glad that, actually. I didn't realise that Heather and James were going to be able to answer the question that I sort of unexpectedly inflicted upon them. But there it is. It's only 2 calls. The plural of anecdote is not data. And we began with data, didn't we? Because in Star Trek The Next Generation, data revealed that in that particular fictional future, Ireland was unified in 2024, would you believe? Less excitingly, perhaps, there was actually a World War III in the 2020s as well, so be careful what you wish for. I don't know whether to move on or not. There's a huge appetite to continue talking about this. There's something, as I mentioned to you, very gratifying about seeing Fermanagh and Belfast and Ballymena and all of these places popping up on my screen, but there's a heck of a lot of other stuff going on as well, so bear with, and I will make an executive decision.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation, this is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 11 o'clock. The Defence Secretary has accused Russian troops of amorality and corruption as the country marks its defeat of Nazi Germany with a Victory Day parade. Vladimir Putin has given a speech in Moscow comparing the war in Ukraine to the Soviet Union's victory over Hitler during World War II. He also insisted it was necessary because of a Western invasion plan. Ben Wallace says Moscow's military leaders are now repeating crimes of the past.
They are utterly complicit in Putin's hijacking of their forebearers' proud history, of repelling fascism and sacrificing themselves for a higher purpose. And now they are the ones inflicting needless suffering in the service of lowly gangsterism.
New research suggests around 1 in 7 adults now live in homes where people have skipped meals because they can't afford to eat. The Food Foundation charity is urging the government to increase benefits in line with inflation. The former Bank of England chief economist Andy Haldane has told LBC rising prices are going to be a problem for some time to come.
We're now looking prospectively at double-digit rates of inflation, which is not quite back to the 70s, but getting on that way. And it's not just, I think, that the level of inflation is high. I'm slightly fearful it might stick around for some little while as well. This won't be come and gone in a matter of months. I think this could be years rather than months.
A 13-year-old boy has died after collapsing during a football match at the weekend. Samuel Akwasi suffered a cardiac arrest while playing for FC Cavaliers in Nottingham on Saturday. Labour's Wes Streeting has told LBC he's confident Durham police will find Sir Keir Starmer didn't break any coronavirus rules. The force is investigating a meeting in April last year where the party leader ate a curry and drank beer with colleagues. A newspaper claims the event was pre-planned, but Mr Streeting has dismissed any claims of dishonesty.
He stopped for a meal, and despite what the Daily Mail said over the weekend with this supposedly kind of groundbreaking Labour memo, I don't think it's breaking news that Keir Starmer eats dinner.
Morrison's has put forward an improved offer for McColl's in the hope it'll beat a rival bid from the owners of Asda. The convenience store chain collapsed into administration last week, putting 16,000 jobs at risk. It's claimed both interested parties will be asked to table best and final bids. In the city a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading down 81 points at 73.06. The pound buys $1.23 and €1.16. The weather: Scotland and Northern Ireland, cloudy and windy with rain at times, which will reach northwestern parts of England and Wales later. Otherwise, mostly fine with hazy sunshine. A warm afternoon, especially in the southeast, a high of 22 Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Holly Harris.
Oh dear, Rex has got more fleas. Not sure we can jump on this right away.
One of Mira's vets has just relocated, and her small team is already dog-tired. She needs to hire.
I'm sorry we can't see him in a tick. What about in 2 weeks?
Indeed can help her find great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Screen for quality candidates using Indeed assessments to make sure they have the experience your job needs. To start hiring, visit Indeed.com/try today.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 4 minutes after 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Listen, I know, and thank you, and I will. I'm not going to carry on talking about it now, Dom, in Belfast and Nigel and others, but I am. Absolutely, because this is actual existential stuff for the United Kingdom. It's incredible, isn't it? And you think about what's on the front page of the Sun today. Oh, the passing of Dennis Waterman, which is very sad. And you don't even need to check the mail. I bet they've... Yeah, Rattles Starmer snubs the chance to clear air. And then you'll remember the editorial staff at the Daily Mail are probably more responsible than anybody else for the fact that the very future of the United Kingdom is now in greater jeopardy than it has been at any point since 1921. But they don't want to talk about that. Of course they don't. I've had some amazing messages coming in over the last few days with this so-called Beergate story, saying, James, I used to think you exaggerated about the power of the right-wing media, but this narrative now where Keir Starmer's dinner in Durham is somehow being held up as a counterbalance to the multiple transgressions, lies, parties, bring your own bottle, break the Prime Minister's kids swing, invite your interior decorator to eat cake, have your wife there, actually literally encouraging people to wind down, joking about it at press conference rehearsals. It is a bit, some people, thankfully, are finally seeing the light. Others, sadly, of course, will remain in the darkness for as long as they want to. But another story that I think in ordinary times would be dominating our conversations. I often think, I've told you this before, I often think we mentioned Data a bit from Star Trek. If you're not familiar with it, he's a robot. He's an incredibly sentient robot, isn't he? Or an incredibly sophisticated robot, but he is a robot, hence the name Data. If Data was in charge of the program, we probably would talk about very little but the climate crisis. And in terms of if there was an algorithm of importance, and Data is all about algorithms. So if there was an algorithm of importance and urgency, the thing that we should be discussing most, climate crisis would be far and ahead. And I mean talking about it honestly, not pretending to get angry about protesters, because I don't want to say about foreigners anymore in this country without being called a... So, I mean, that objective algorithm of topic choice, if you were to put the numbers in and crunch them, almost every day climate crisis would come out of the bottom. And then, of course, you change the algorithm slightly according to your concerns. So if you're patriotic and you care about the future of the United Kingdom particularly, rather than the planet as a whole, then you put those numbers in and the computer crunches it down, and out comes the situation in Northern Ireland. I mean, there can be nothing more important than the possible breakup of the United Kingdom for people who claim, imagine having the Union flag flapping in the background every time you appear on the telly, and yet being part of a government that is doing more to jeopardise the Union than any government in the history of these islands. Any government at all in the history of these islands. It's almost ironic, isn't it? And then, of course, you come to the micro rather than the macro, the here and now rather than the potential futures. So in my massive machine that crunches the numbers, the objective algorithm for topic choice, you would get today climate crisis if we were looking at it at a planetary level. You'd get Northern Ireland and to a slightly lesser extent Scotland, of course. The SNP had a good week last week, a good election last week as well, which of course increases their prerogative, if you like, for another referendum. Then, so that the future of the United Kingdom, the potential breakup, the probable, possibly rather than possible breakup of the United Kingdom, that would come out at the bottom of your algorithm. But if you actually put in what matters most today, right now, it would be the cost of living. And there are two stories today that I almost hesitate to bring to your attention if you're not already aware of them, because they are bleak. That's the only word I can think of to describe. I'll tell you what, because this is going to be so bleak, how about I promise to throw in a woke watch before 12 o'clock? It is now working. The email account is now checked occasionally, and it does even more occasionally throw up something that we could actually use on the programme. My thanks to Henry Valentine for submitting to, that's a great name, isn't it, for submitting today's woke watch. We'll have a look at that. And there is also a possibility that I'll do a slightly more serious woke watch as well, because Vladimir Putin is using the language of the self-styled anti-woke brigade now to describe the West. You'd think, wouldn't you, if you were if you were, making a crust out of pretending that woke people or wokeness poses an existential threat to our way of life here in sunny Britain, you'd think that when Vladimir Putin is singing the same songs that you're singing to justify his treatment of Ukraine, to justify his war in Ukraine, you might pause and think, maybe I've got this one, maybe I'm on the wrong side of this one as well, like I was with Brexit and Trump and all of them. But no, we are where we are. So I may have a slightly more serious woke watch for you as well. But the two stories I want to draw your attention to next are about energy costs, which the front page of the Daily Mirror is absolutely clear on, and food, which is... Do you ever have stories you don't want to believe? See, something funny happens to me sometimes when I read stories like this. I get an understanding. Maybe I'm being unduly charitable if you're a regular listener to the programme. That is my curse. Excessive kindness. Undue charitability. Is that a word? Charitability? Should be. It is now. So, when people try to convince themselves that there's no such thing as suffering or poverty, and they do it in a really ugly way. They'll do the stuff about flat screen tellies, or, I look at those refugees, they've got phones, they can't possibly be needy, they can't possibly be desperate. And it comes across to the rest of us as gross, right? I mean, it's really disgusting. You want to bring religion into it, it would fly in the face of any religious doctrine. I'm most familiar with Christianity, and nothing could be less Christian than the way this current government talks about the people that Jesus would have put at the top of his list of those who need the most help and attention. I get it. A charitable reading of the situation is that they're trying to convince themselves that these problems aren't real because the reality is so bleak. And that probably describes some people, or at least it describes the susceptibility to that kind of toxic Murdoch-flavoured rhetoric about flat-screen TVs and single mothers and council housing and all of that stuff. You'd think, I don't really want this to be true. I hate the idea of being people so badly off that my own problems feel pathetic. I don't want that to be true. So you kind of become quite easy meat, if you like, for the professional purveyors of hatred who populate almost all of the right-wing tabloid newspapers in this country. Because I feel it a bit. I don't want it to be true. I see the Guardian front page today. More than 2 million Britons can't afford to eat today. I see the Daily Mirror front page. Direct debit payments have at least doubled for 1 in 4 energy users. And I sort of think, part of me doesn't want it to be true, but it probably is. And part of me doesn't want it to be as horrible as it sounds, but it probably is. So here's my challenge for you today. More than 2 million adults in the UK have gone without food for a whole day over the past month because they cannot afford to eat. How many times would I need to read that out before the traffic stopped? More than 2 million adults in the UK have gone without food for a whole day over the past month because they cannot afford to eat. And that is before direct debit payments for energy users, approximately 1 in 4 energy users, doubled. They went up by 54% across the board in April, but some direct debits have gone up by 100%. So it's about 4.6% of the adult population going a whole day without eating, and it's not true. I mean, it's not new. The numbers, oddly, in the first week of lockdown in March 2020 were very high as well, but this is by far the highest ever. and food insecurity as well is the second highest ever, because that first week of lockdown in March 2020 saw households experience food insecurity because we all ran out and stockpiled, didn't we? So that caused problems that could have been avoided. These ones I don't think can be avoided. The government is doing pretty much nothing about it. If you please challenge that statement. God, I'd love to believe they were. 0345 60609 73. I'll read it one more time. I told you it was bleak. This is a 57% jump in the proportion of households cutting back on food or skipping meals over the first 3 months of this year. 1 in 7 adults estimated to be food insecure. That's 7.3 million people. We've got one of Britain's biggest energy suppliers calling for urgent government action to help. And what are they doing? What are they doing? They're promising to rip up Brexit red tape in the Queen's speech. They're promising to, attack the human rights bill, make it easier to deport people. Priti Patel's going to be furious with the new Doctor Who, isn't she? Have you seen that, the new Doctor Who? British Rwandan guy? A Rwandan guy who is free to travel through space and time. That's Priti Patel's worst nightmare. Where are they going to report him to? Wish my knowledge of Doctor Who was slightly better so I could have inserted a planet there. What's the planet he was born on? Where did don't at me, I need my inbox. So, I hope this isn't insensitive. Well, I know it's not insensitive. I hope it's not silly or inappropriate. What I want you to do today, and I know it'll be tough, but you know that I'll be warm. And you know this is important. I want to talk to you if you never thought you'd be food insecure, right? I take incredible calls, and we will continue to do so for as long as I have this job, from people who are absolutely at the worst extremity in these kind of issues, and we may do so today. I have to talk to my therapist after taking some of those calls, because I can't help, can't do more. It's so fun. I know you feel it as well, because the generosity you display when we speak to people who are really suffering is inspirational, but it's, you know, it's the nature of humanity, isn't it? You can't touch the sides sometimes. I like to think that just listening is a valuable gift, but it's not going to put any food on the table, is it? Letting you have your say, letting you speak. But looking at these numbers here, 7.3 million adults now in this country food insecure, 2 million going without food for a day because they can't afford the food, a 57% jump in the proportion of households cutting back on food or skipping meals.